Error handling in TypeScript and therefore JavaScript can be a little bit messy, but there's a way that we can make our code handle errors better in a way that it's more clean, easy to understand, and extend over time. So let's dive right into an example, and then we'll refactor together and I'll show you what I mean. So imagine we have a web app and there's a form, and that form updates a person. Person has a name and an age. They're stored in a SQLite database in the people table. Now, we don't have a web app here. We just have a function. We'll just make pretend, right? So handle form submit with ID 1. We'll update the person's name to Dracula and their age 55. So if I save this over here on the right, it reruns every time I save it, and we toast success. So imagine you're in a web app and it shows a little pop-up that says updated person or whatever it says. C database just puts some data in our database for our example. Now let's look at handle form submit. It takes our parameters, and those are already typed. Maybe you have some sort of library that types this stuff that makes it more clear what data is being submitted. But let's say even if you do have a library or you check it yourself, well, that's another sort of error flow here where if for some reason a missing form field is expected or the data is a different type, you'd have to either normalize it or show an error or something. So that even goes to show it's just like it's errors all the way down. So when we update the person, this updatePerson function is a function that we own, calls out to SQLite, and has some business logic in it, you might call it. And I'll show you that business logic. And then we just output some data just to make sure it worked. And otherwise, we show an error. So let's show an error. And I think one way to do that is to say, put an ID for a user that doesn't exist. Why this would happen, who knows? But a lot of errors happen for a lot of different reasons. And we see over here on the right that it failed to update the person, and not sure why, but maybe we could just assume that it's person not found, right? And maybe that's fine. And this is like a simple but naive function handler. So let's add some errors and error handling to our code, because that becomes inevitable, and you have to kind of handle these things. Maybe your application has something where you can't have a string, like maybe you're using MySQL or Postgres, and your name column has a character limit of 255. So let's go and make Dracula, like we'll make it a really long string that someone submitted. And our function, updatePerson, which you can see here, threw an error, and it said name too long. So what happens when a function throws an error? Well, we try to do that code, and then we catch the error. And we're in TypeScript, so the error is unknown, but we'll add some typing to that so we can assert accordingly. But let's make it so that our code doesn't crash the application when it exceeds the length limit. So because we're in TypeScript and we don't know what error is, we need to say type of error is an object, and we'll assert that it's not null by just doing that, and we'll say message in error, and that type of error.message is a string. So maybe there's other ways you would do this, but this is one way to basically let us go and say toast error, and we can say error.message, and we'll run that code again. All right, so now we toast error, and it says name too long. So the user would go and they would say, oh, okay, well, let me fix my name. But there's other business logic here. Like maybe there's forbidden names for whatever reason. Maybe you don't, your business application doesn't allow curse words, or maybe it doesn't allow Alucard, Dracula spelled backwards. Well, now it says forbidden name used, and we're catching that. But what if we don't want forbidden name used to come back? Maybe that's some sort of like, we don't want to tie our updatePerson error handle errors to what our user sees. So maybe we instead do something like if error message equals forbidden name used, then we'll say then we'll do a custom error which says must use a different name. you get the point, right? There's any number of things that could happen in terms of our errors, and we need to handle them. But we've kind of like written ourselves through this code to handle these errors, and let's read through handle form submit now. So we have a top level try catch, but the thing with the top level try catch is that, are we catching errors from updatePerson, from toast, from something else, from getPerson, right? That calls out to the database, so that could also fail. Also, if toast fails and then we try catch again, it might raise again. This is really messy code. It's really hard to understand because if you look here, like the flow through the code, we try to update the person. If that succeeds, we show a toast. If it fails, and we assume that because it returns a Boolean right now of whether or not it succeeded, well, we show a toast. And then we try to just catch anything and show another toast error. And this is a bad user experience. This code is it's hard to understand. So let's go and make it better. The first place to start is to actually look at our updatePerson function. And while this is all contrived, it's actually really close to code I have seen, I have written, I have refactored. So let's look at this. So updatePerson, right? It's a function we own. We have some names that we forbid. And maybe this would be an array and you'd block certain things or whatever. And we throw an error. And we have, if the person's name is too long, we throw an error. And then here is the SQLite code that calls run. And run, here you can see the signature here. It returns a number. Well, the docs don't tell you what that number is. So if it's 1, it succeeded. If it's 0 or something other than 1, it failed. And it doesn't tell you why it failed. But we could assume, maybe it's the ID, or maybe some data is passed in that's not right, or whatever it is. But we'll actually make that an unknown error. I think that's maybe a better thing, and we'll go from there. But how we make this better, right? Rather than just throwing is bad. Throwing should only throw when something is very wrong. Like if you couldn't connect to SQL, throw and say database couldn't be connected to, and then that would propagate up your application to hopefully some high-level error handling that catches that specific error, or maybe like an unknown error, that it only reaches it when it's like things are broken, things are very down. But this isn't things are very down. This is actually business logic, right? We shouldn't throw an error when data is entered that we are anticipating being wrong, or we know that from a database perspective could be wrong. So another problem, really quick, just to hop back to here, is like, okay, let's say you didn't add all these try catches. You don't actually know who's catching your errors when you're relying on throwing. And I think that's really hard to understand the code that's happening. You have to know where the error handlers are, or you have to, I don't know, it's very obtuse, and I think that's part of what we want to fix. So let's make this better. So in Rust, there is this type called result. And here's an example of a function from the Rust docs. It parses a version from an array of integers, or slice, that might be called actually. And it tells you whether, it returns whether, if it's okay, it returns the version. If it's not okay, it returns an error. And then when you call that function and you get the return value of version, you can match, which it does pattern matching on the results. There's other ways you could code this too, and this is just to show what that looks like. So let's refactor to use that. Whoops. So let's open person, and we'll import the library I wrote, and we'll import type result, and we'll import error, and we'll import OK. And it's on JSR, which is the JavaScript registry that exists, but you can also get it from NPM, but I'm going to go ahead and just do this because I'm using Dino, and it's just easy to import these directly. Now, those aren't used yet, so but we'll make them used. And what we'll do here is, rather than return a Boolean, we'll actually return a result. And we'll return a person if it's successful. And if it's not successful, we'll return, we'll call it person update error. That's a type that we'll define here. So we'll define type person update error. We'll make that, we'll have forbidden name. We'll use screaming snake case, so it's clear this shouldn't be shown to the user. We'll separate user-facing errors from our like error IDs or types, kind of. So name too long, and we could do not found. We could say unknown, something like that. And then here in our code, rather than throwing a new error, we actually can return error, which is a function that comes from the result library that I made. And what we would do here is we would just say forbidden name. And for some reason with Dino, to make the compiler happy, I have to do as const here. And then here, instead of saying forbidden name, we would say name too long. And then here, when it's successful, we return OK, and we pass in the person that's passed out, or passed in as an argument. I'll show you how to use that. Delete the true. And then here we return error, and let's actually use unknown here, and then we'll add the not found in a second. So return that here. I have a typo, so it's catching that. So that's also a nice reason to use a type rather than just a generic string. And let's do if get person. This is another function that exists, and we'll do person.id. So if the person doesn't exist in the database, then we'll return error not found as const. So now we handle all of these. We can't have typos in our strings, which is a nice part about using a type up there. We added another database query here. Maybe, database engines other than SQLite, or maybe this library or whatever would return something better, so you didn't have to do that get person. But for our case, let's just let it be. So now we have updatePerson that returns a result, which you can see if I open the docs here, it returns a result. And I'll show you now how to use it. So we can actually now, I'm going to just rewrite all of this code here. We can actually say const, we'll call update res, like update result, is updatePerson params. And we can do, here we can just say if update res dot okay is okay. Otherwise, we know it's an error, so we'll go from there. And we can just toast success and keep our old code there where it fetches it, just to make sure for the case of this example. Let me save it so it cleans up. Why is this okay? Oh, because it's got to be called like that. Then here, instead of our try catch and our else, we actually can just say toast error, delete all of this. You can also, because we return the person, that's just what's passed in, the person that's returned. So yeah, we'll just say that they're the same. Returned person. You can actually get that by doing update res dot data. I'll show you that in a second. Let's format that. Now here, for our error handling, it becomes much, much easier to do. So let's just say update error copy, and we can say update res dot error. And what is error? Well, it's a person update error. And we can then have like a constant object called update error copy that takes the different possible error type, like error keys, let's call them. We'll export that type. We can say person update error. Well, I think we can actually just do this. Forbidden name. I don't even think we need this. Sorry. We'll type it. We'll say this is a record, which is of type person update error, and it returns a string of the user. We've got to import this. I don't know why that didn't do it automatically. close some of these. Name not allowed. Use a different name. And we'll go and we'll set all these up. Except these shouldn't be equal signs. Wow. They should be colons. Okay. Unknown error. Error occurred. Please try again. You know, make these more user facing. Why is this upset? Oh yeah, it has to have all of them. Another reason why types are nice. So not found, person not found, select a different person or whatever. I don't know why this would happen. Again, this is just sort of name too long must be less than 255 characters. Maybe that gets interpolated from a constant or something like that. But anyway, there we go. Thanks for bearing with me through that. That's that mess. But I think it's a good thing to separate these error keys from the user-facing data. And here now you can see when we toast error, name not allowed, use a different name. If we say we don't use a forbidden name, but it's a 3, which is an ID that isn't found, person not found. If we do 1, it succeeds, and you can see that our updated person and our person in the database, maybe we change this to database person, return person. So you get the data by calling .data. You get the error that's returned by calling .error. And yeah, what's our other one? If it's too long, so repeat 300 or 3000. Name too long must be less than 255 characters. So we refactored updatePerson to use the result library, which uses this, sometimes it's called railroad-oriented programming, where we check if it's okay. If it is okay, we show the success. Else, we show a user-facing error, and we handle all of our expected errors here because we have this here. And maybe you would do something different based on different errors. Like you could do like if we could do const error is update res dot error, right? And then here we could get rid of this. We could say if error is equal to not found, you know, redirect, you know, whatever. Whatever your business logic is. Business logic, I just mean is like the logic your application should follow. But this is now much, much easier to understand and handle compared to before, where we're trying and we're catching and we're not sure what the error is and who's doing it. Now, if something happens, if like updatePerson does do something that is exceptional and raises through, well, we're not worried about that here necessarily. That should be handled at a higher level. That is a way that you can make TypeScript and JavaScript error handling better. And have used this pattern for the last year. I really love it. There's more functions that exist here. So like you can do is error, and that's a method that tells you whether or not something is an error. There's result, has different functions that you can call too. Check out the docs on JSR, NPM. Yeah, the code is hosted at JSR here. So you can see examples and how to use it, all the functions that exist, and it's also on NPM here. And you can pull it into your NPM projects if you use that, if you use some package manager that pulls from it. So yeah, that's one way to make error handling better. I think handle form submit is a much better function, much easier to understand, and better developer experience, better user experience. All right, thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.